arts organisations who are also dealing with practice in studio spaces during this really challenging time. And the idea of this session is to share some of the experiences we've had, and also to open it up for Q&A, but also to have if we want to set up any kind of ongoing discussion fora, because we're going to be in this pandemic situation for at least another few months. And we're learning as we go, and sharing experiences, I think, is a really helpful way of getting through things. Each of my colleagues have got a very short presentation, and I'll let them introduce themselves now so you can see us before we shift to a shared screen. So I'll start with April.
Hello everyone, my name is April Brown. I'm a lecturer in dance practices at Middlesex University, and I'm also part of the co-leadership for the Year 1 module.
And Rob?
Hi everybody, I'm Senior Lecturer Theatre Arts at Middlesex University. And I'll say more in a little while.
And Francois.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Dr. Francois Evans, Associate Professor in Music.
Thank you everybody. And so April's going to share the screen and we'll go through the presentations now, and then we can open it up for questions afterwards.
Of course, so I'll just share my screen now. So welcome everybody, thank you for those of you that have joined us today. We're here from Dance just to give you a bit of an overview about some of the safe practices that we found supportive when we're planning and delivering dance in the studios on campus. My clicker isn't working, here we go. Just wanted to say that we also have Claire Farmer with us, who's our lecturer in dance science at Middlesex University. Claire, are you there?
Hello, nice to see you all.
And between us, we're going to talk to you a little bit about how we have adapted the dance programme at Middlesex in response to COVID, and also how we're making dance practice safe in the studios on campus.
So just to say, and we're going to share some links at the end of this presentation, which hopefully we can also pass on in another format as well to make it easier for you. But we've taken a lot of our guidance from other organisations, so sharing good practice across the dance sector. As April mentioned, I'm a lecturer in dance science, so we've taken a lot of information from the dance science community about how to keep dancers and the teachers safe in the studio. So just to say that our information comes from there, and we'll share some useful things with you at the end where we found this information from. So these are some of our lovely studios we have at Middlesex University. So I'm just going to talk you through some of the things we've put in place in the studio. So when we're actually able to be on campus, which we're really lucky to be able to do, and April's going to talk more about how it works logistically. So you can see in our studios here, we have some markers laid out on the floor, which are 3-meter square boxes in which our dance students dance. So this allows, if they're moving in the space, the box next to them, when they're adjacent, they're not both moving towards the same side. So it gives a little bit more space than just the 2-meter distance. So they've got 3 meters to play with, allows for a little bit more movement. And you can see we just put kind of corners of the boxes, so it didn't feel too restrictive, like I'm in my box and I can't go anywhere else. So there's a little bit of freedom there. You can see they're all wearing masks. So we provided all our dance students with block face masks that they wear, or they can wear their own face mask if they have a one that they prefer. So they wear these throughout class. This is mainly related to droplets coming out of their mouth while they're exercising, but we have actually reduced the intensity of our classes. So they're not going to high cardiovascular activity, which will require heavier breathing, which obviously is quite difficult with the face mask on, and also then increasing respiration and droplets. So the intensity is a little bit lower, which also relates to what you can see on the picture on the left, which is our students doing some lovely conditioning with me. So this is another really important thing, that we've been away from the studio for a really long time. And therefore going straight back into jumping or any kind of high intensity activity is quite difficult, and we want to make sure they're safe. So they are doing some low-level conditioning fundamental movements like squats that they're beautifully demonstrating here as well. And they had a return to fitness program before coming back to campus to try and help them increase their fitness before they arrived into the studio. When they're in the studio, I don't think you can quite make it out, but we do have little bottles of antibacterial gel at every entrance, so the students can antibac their hands as they come into the studio and as they leave as well. We're on the floor a tiny little bit, so obviously they've touched the floor, they want to antibac their hands before and after as well. They arrive into the studio in their dance gear, so we're not really using the changing rooms at the moment, so preferably they arrive in their kits, and then we have spaces at the side for them to leave their equipment, their bags and things, which you can see a little bit more of in the next pictures that April's going to take you through.
Cool. Thank you, Claire. And we just wanted to say as well that we've arrived at where we have done with what we're sharing after probably about 8+ months of planning. It hasn't been plain sailing. We've navigated through a whirlwind of guidance and changes, and kind of collectively we found things that hopefully we think are working. As Claire said, we've very much been supported by professional bodies in dance. We'll share the links that we found helpful with you at the end as well, and perhaps colleagues from Arts Depot can pass those on to those of you that are in the session today as well. So logistically, in terms of the on-campus time, at Middlesex we have 3 year groups. Each year group has approximately about 50 students in each, so it has been a bit of a logistical tongue teaser really. So we've got one on-campus day per year group, and then each year group is broken down into campus cluster groups. We're lucky enough to have multiple dance spaces, so those student groups stay in the same dance studio from the morning, and they're with us until the end of the day, so that when they are travelling to the university campus, that trip is very much worthwhile, and we try to put as much practical activity in that day as we can. As tutors, we move between the spaces, and as you can see in the pictures of the studios, the staff have allocated areas that are separate to the students. The on-campus time does sit within a much wider programme of blended learning, so we are continuing to learn virtually as well, and we have found from kind of trying lots of different ways of facilitating dance teaching virtually that the students are responding best to the live Zoom technique classes. We found that students particularly are struggling with motivation during this pandemic, especially as dancers and kind of creative artists, we're used to getting up, going into a space and working with people. So logging on from your bedroom can be quite difficult to find the motivation. So the live classes, students have said that they feel there's a lot more kind of agency there for them to get up and be present and see people. We wanted to mention as well that we've found it's really important to make space for well-being. So in the schedule that you can see, we have screen breaks where we're encouraging students to leave their devices. And then we've also embedded a weekly newsletter that Claire runs that shares kind of well-being advice and links to healthy eating, sleeping well, looking after yourself. And then we also have touch base meetings on a Thursday afternoon where we have a Zoom call and a kind of a coffee and cake catch up where students can just have a conversation with us, because we've noticed that we're really missing the kind of corridor chats and community that we would normally have when we're on campus every day. And I'm sure everybody's feeling that as a team. We wanted to mention as well, just in the bottom corner there, you can see a screen of 4 images. We found logistically for teaching, having a group of 7 dancers in a studio is quite different to when we would normally have kind of half the cohort in one space. So we found for programming and kind of workload for our tutors that it's worked quite well that students may be in separate dance studios, but on a Tuesday afternoon we Zoom into each other's spaces. So Claire can teach, lead a lecture, to the whole cohort, and they're in their dance studio spaces, and they're kind of supported by other tutors that are just there to make sure that they're engaging and practicing safely. And we found the students have really enjoyed being in a studio and being able to see other dancers beyond their cluster of 7. So we just wanted to share that as something that we found to be quite helpful. So I think for us, really, that's probably the headlines. I'm not sure how long we've spoken for, but we just wanted to flag that these kind of resources and points of kind of reference have been really supportive for us. I want to just flag at the bottom here, Claire has been wonderful for us and created 2 videos that are available on our YouTube channel, which shows her guiding students and staff really through how to set up your dance space at home safely, and also how to warm up safely before taking part in activity. I don't know if Claire, you want to flag the top 3 before we close.
Yeah, so a lot of the information we used to come up with the guidelines and what we're doing came from kind of the international dance and dance science community. So the organisation at the top is the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science. And this page that links through to has actually amalgamated lots of recommendations, useful videos, blogs that have been written by dance teachers around the world about how they've implemented everything and sharing best practice. So it's really useful to find lots of resources and guidance from those different experts in medicine and science as well. One of those blogs that I helped to curate is about reopening dance schools in a global pandemic. So there's a blog written by, so they're from different countries, so you can also see the differences between countries, but there's a written blog, and there's a lovely vlog from a dance school in Hong Kong that walks you through their studios, which is really nice to see how they've implemented it. And then One Dance UK, which is the sector support organisation for dance in the UK, ran a whole series of webinars, which I know a lot of our staff watched to find out that the current advice from those. So there's a whole series of webinars, and we did just put a little note because they were recorded kind of in June, July time. So some of the guidance has changed a little bit. So if you do watch them, to just bear that in mind as well.
I think that's it from us in dance. I know we're going to go to a Q&A at the end, so I'm going to pass over to Rob, and then we can come to questions if that sounds good for everyone afterwards.
That's great, April. Thank you so much to you and Claire.
No worries. Okay, Rob, I'll pass you over.
Thanks, thank you. Hi again, everybody. Theatre arts, we run 2 programs. We run a design program and a performance program, and I teach on the performance program. Although if you bring up the next slide, April, sorry, or do I have that control also? Sorry, yeah, if we just stick on this. So we've got predominantly two, we're working out 2 kinds of spaces. Design you see there on the left, and performance on the right. We've got a quite sizable theatre where we can safely work with around 12 students if it's a fairly stationary activity. So I'm going to really speak now in these few minutes from a performance perspective, because that's the one I have. And I should say also that I'm working as a movement specialist. So some of what April and Claire have just touched on there is really relevant to the way I work. I mean, I'm working through a modality quite often known as the Feldenkrais Method, which is actually proved really useful in this environment, because it's quite often it's a modality that's quite still. It can work on a yoga mat, and I found myself utilizing that much more. And in fact, I've really found that the students have adapted to that mode of working, that kind of slow, still, quiet, calm mode. I feel there's a kind of need for that, and a space for that in the body. And an appetite for that that's proved really welcome for all kinds of well-being reasons, apart from any kind of movement reasons. So I've been teaching a mix of studio-based and online. And like dance, we've organised the space such that first years are in on a Monday, second years a Tuesday, third years a Thursday. So we've organised it in that way. And typically, I've kept quite, and I believe we've kept the studio sessions quite physically based. And because we're using voice a lot in our work, we've kept the voice work to the online sessions. Because there has been, quite a bit of research that suggests that voice is an activity, especially expressive voice, that adds another layer of risk to the situation we're in. So with that constraint, of course, there's an opportunity. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about working through theatre, is that you face constraints all the time, and sometimes they're deliberately produced, and here we are with constraints that are put on us by the situation we're in, but we can work with them, and we can work with them really productively. So the idea of working in a meter square physically in quite a static space has afforded a lot of exploration through the body. Even working with that meter square, and what we've found ourselves doing quite a lot. And if you look on the right, this is me yesterday in a solo module where I'm working with a 3-week block on character. And actually what I've done here is use the chairs as a kind of site, spaced 2 meters apart. You may not look it there actually, but it's certainly a meter plus, to just work on kind of impersonation and imitation, and using the chair as a kind of as a site of performance. Next week I'm actually going to be asking them to do a lip sync, playing with gender and drag as a kind of mode of performance. So actually the lip sync works quite well in this situation because they're actually not producing sound. But that adds another challenge because lip sync's all about the mouth. So what do they do about masks? Like dance, we've got the kindly given to us by them, the block masks, which are actually really good, allowing some air for the voice to be produced. Next week in that class, I'm going to, manage a situation where we've got an audience at one end and create a playing space at the other, so that it is possible actually to take the mask off and have the face exposed, which is obviously crucial for our discipline. So it's about also, I think, what we found is mitigating those risks. You're never going to eliminate the risk. There's always ways. It's just kind of managing those and being careful. Obviously, we've got all the usual measures in place, the sanitation stations, not just around the building, but in the spaces themselves. I also just wanted to say something about the voice work, because it is probably peculiar to theatre rather than dance, and obviously music's working differently. The voice we've kept to online, but there are things to explore there, I found, in terms of playing with whispering and sotto voce, and really kind of looking at ways to find within this tighter range the possibilities. So I think overall what I wanted to kind of deliver a message of from my colleagues and myself is that actually we're also finding ways to treat this as a kind of research situation. Like what else, what can we find that's new in terms of fresh ways of working, given the situations and constraints we're working under. I think I'm happy to leave anything else to the Q&A. If anyone's got any questions about the design aspects, I'll be happy to try and answer them. But I might not speak to that right now. But needless to say, you know, they're operating in small teams, in bubbles, because the spaces are smaller. Yeah, I might just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rob. So it's terrific. We're going to do a swap of screens now as Francois shares his screen with everybody for music. So just give him a minute to do that. Hi, Francois. You need to unmute.
Yeah, I am unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just get myself set up here. Gosh, Zoom has a lot of buttons in it, doesn't it? Here we go. Okay. Can you all see my screen now?
Yeah, that's coming through fine.
That nice and clear. Okay. Yeah, I suppose my presentation is a little bit different from those that have gone so far, in that I'm trying to combine here the changes that we've had to make in music to be able to keep campus activity going, but also relating this to current government guidelines, which as we know are changing all the time, and what's possible and not possible in schools or where you may be teaching at the moment. So it's, I suppose, sharing practice. The programs that we run in music at Middlesex are the BA Honours in Music, with these 4 exit awards: composition performance, jazz, popular music, and music production. We also have a degree that runs alongside BA Music Business and Arts Management, which feeds in where our students meet together to discuss aspects of music business and the industry. At the moment, music is really having to defend itself as a subject. I mean, I've seen things online about the dangers of singing in choir and so on. So we really have to defend ourselves. And much of the work that I've seen online at the moment defending music points out just how wonderful it is during a time of COVID for bringing people together and for helping with good mental hygiene. And that singing and playing together are such useful people to keep human beings together as we've been separated into our little boxes here. There's a nice web link at musicmark.org where you'll find ammunition, should you need it, to defend your musical activities. And that ammunition includes proof that music is still safe to practice. Not only that, it's wise to practice during a time of COVID. There's a nice quote from Dr. Jodie Underhill at teachwire.net, where she says that scientific research into singing and the playing of wind and brass instruments thus far does not suggest that these activities present a higher risk than speaking and breathing at the same volume. But yes, we have to use larger rooms. They have to be ventilated with the heating switched on as well. Yes, I know it's a waste, but otherwise it gets too cold. And limiting the numbers of people present. So room size largely dictates the number of musicians that can perform at one time while we maintain 2-meter social distancing. The ISM, Incorporated Society of Musicians, advises on the wisdom of running a risk assessment, and they have suggested formats that you might like to look up at the web link at the bottom of the page. I can share these slides in PDF form with anyone who might like to see them. But there's a nice structure there for identifying hazards, assessing the risks, controlling the risks, and then feeding back in according to practice to record findings and to review controls in place. So I won't read through all those. We've found at Middlesex that we can still run our choir and our jazz ensembles and chamber music performance teaching by, yes, having players 2 meters apart, but also thinking about the direction in which our musicians face. So there have been suggestions that musicians can start playing back to back, which is interesting because they can't see each other, but they can hear each other, which can be a good thing because then they're focusing more on oral perception rather than visual perception, which is great for music. So I've drawn little diagrams there that show how musicians might be facing. Also, if they're blowing out with their instrument or singing in choir. April was mentioning earlier how water droplets emerge from the mouth. It's difficult to sing with a mask on, it filters the sound. So our choristers have to be facing outward. There's also a tradition of this in music, as we know anyway, with chori spezzi or spatialized choirs. And this can be a new way of getting us to think about the way in which we perform and using spatial aspects of performance when our singers are far away from each other. Another technique that we're finding more and more is useful under COVID at the moment is to run mixed mode teaching. So I was asked not to speak about techniques for online teaching, but I'm going to kind of leak this in here to suggest, for example, that where you have a choir of singers who are spaced very far apart, as you know, if you've sung in a choir, if you're not sure of your line, it's nice to be able to stand close to somebody who knows their part well, because then you can just secretly echo what they're doing. And that actually, it's not a bad thing. It actually strengthens the whole performance of the choir if people lean on each other by listening to each other. So the way we've found that works to solve this problem, when you can't hear the person next to you because they're 2 meters away, is to run guide tracks online, perhaps recorded with electronic instruments, for each singer's part to be learned separately at home. And then when they do come together spaced, they've had a chance to practice from an electronic perfect version of their part rather than rehearsing in a room together in the choir. The other aspect of online teaching that supports us when we do get together and strengthens that performance when we're together is to have not just breakout rooms for students, but actually breakout online rooms for students that are not led by teaching staff. So encouraging students to practice together in small groups online so that they can learn these choral parts which I've just described. Orchestras, ensembles and choirs, very briefly, it's quite a lot to say, but I'll run through this swiftly. There's a special point about brass players who will often pull out their mouthpieces and warm those up. When the mouthpiece is out of the instrument, that throws air droplets into the air when the instrument is not attached to the mouthpiece to catch those air particles. So we discourage our students from pulling out mouthpieces and just being aware of the effect that their warming up activities have under COVID. Another thing we've done is to put training videos online to introduce our students to our studio spaces. This is for our production students. Inevitably, studio spaces are very small, they're cramped, they can only fit perhaps 2 or 3 people at a time. So David, one of our wonderful music tech lecturers, has made these bite-sized videos in 15-minute chunks, which doesn't overlean on students' concentration time spans, showing actually in situ how to use equipment so that when they do arrive in small groups, they already know how to use the equipment because they've studied these videos online that were done in the same room that they're going to visit. We also at Middlesex have a personal tutor system in place. So any students who encounter problems with internet connections or motivation, as the dance staff were mentioning earlier, can approach their personal tutors and those problems can be addressed. General principles, 2 meters apart, according to the Incorporated Society of Musicians, where a staff member has to get close to adjust things like posture when teaching piano, for example. Sometimes we have to get closer than 2 meters away to correct player position. That time when you're 1 meter away needs to be minimized. Bear in mind that peripatetic teachers, we have them as well, visiting instrumental teachers, will be breaking out of regular bubbles and working across different schools, different campuses. And so there should be safety measures in place there to ensure that there's hand washing and cleaning of equipment as and where necessary. When finding advice online, we're all aware that there are different rules that are changing in Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales and England. So we have to be careful to make sure that the rules that we're following are in tune with our local country or area. And then, of course, rooms ventilated with heating on, as I mentioned before. Some cleaning products can be really expensive. Bear in mind that actually other cleaning products, we were advised by Steinway pianos, for example, that window cleaner can be used on plastic keys for piano. And so long as it's alcohol-based, it will do a very good job for sterilizing. So look out for cheaper cleaning products if they are just as effective and have the right ingredients. Where there's fixed equipment, it has to be cleaned as well between user, and then mobile equipment, particularly if you're using microphones, they have to be put to a 72-hour quarantine because microphones are really difficult to sterilize. Paper parts, you can use gloves, or we use folders as well, and let only the person who's using parts handle them. Hand washing takes precedence over hand sanitizers. Avoid touching the mouth. I'll just wrap up with some links there that will be useful if you want to clean equipment. And then if we're teaching our young people to behave well in a socially responsible way to protect the older generation, it's important that they keep up those activities when they're off campus as well. At my local supermarket, one morning, I was wearing my mask, lots of young people in there, none of them wearing masks, and the shop staff not doing anything despite the notices outside saying keep your mask on. So if the young people know the reasons that they're being asked to do these things, if they themselves feel less at risk, then that protects society as a whole, and it's good social conduct. Finish up with some links. They're online. I can hand these out on PDF of useful advice from music education and Kando Music and others there for you to see. But that's me done.
That's terrific, Francois. Thank you very much indeed.